I'm Mike Jones, and I'm joined by State Representative Dwayne Yunker, who was up until recently a city councilor in the city of Grants Pass, where the unfolding drama on the homeless and court precedents are being set here, which I think is a model for the entire state in their minds. How you doing, Dwayne?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me here.
You're welcome, sir. And so I want to start off by playing a couple of clips of you in your last city council meeting that I think really summed it up. And by the response that we got from the public, I think most of the public agrees with what you said and agrees with the actions of the new city councilors. Even though it didn't, well, it's a sticky situation. So let's start out with, if you want to know what's going on in Oregon politics, I highly recommend that you follow Dwayne Yunker on X. And his Facebook is pretty good too. You must have a pretty good staff helping you out, either that or you're doing a lot of tweeting. So, so this is good. Here's a clip from that last meeting here, and I'd like to get your response afterward.
I want to point to a couple council memos that were put out in October that were ignored by the old council. There's one from October 8th, and there's one from October 28th. And they're from the city manager, law enforcement, asking us to address these sites and the problems. And the previous council would not do it. There also was a memo, an email sent to previous council about the fencing for the businesses there. I know myself, and I think one other councilor said we need to protect this business. No one cared. The old council didn't care. They didn't care that the businesses around this site on J Street were getting robbed, theft. As long as the homeless people get what they want, the businesses can be, who cares? That's what it was. They could steal Christmas presents from kids at a buildings over there in December, but as long as we get our homeless camp for them. What about these people? What about the business owners?
I think that really struck a chord with a lot of people. It certainly is what I'm thinking on it, and I think the majority of the people that voted for the new city council.
Yes.
And
I would agree. Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you just said.
Here's the second half of that.
No one's talking about the businesses, the children, none of that. It's all about people that are taking from the city. No one's talking about the crimes. Just in the last couple days, the couple 45 days, there's been 2 articles about our chief of police talking about all the crime picked up around J Street and what's going on. No one's talking about that. All you're talking about is people that are taking and not respecting others. No one wants to hurt a homeless person, but they get tired of the conduct that's happening to others and the disrespect to our community. No one.
And there it is, right there. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And I think, we have a big problem in the discussion about this of lumping all homeless people into one category as though they are all the unfortunate homeless, when in reality, the vast majority of them are drug addicts and as a result of that fact, criminals. And this is something that has to change, but aren't we kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place now?
I would definitely say, yeah, this new court case was definitely targeted. It has been a drip of information coming out that it was coordinated, obviously, from the previous mayor. The Dr. Murray at Mint, what I'm being told, does no longer belong to Mint. It was a coordinated attack on the city. In Sarah Bristol, she's not a mayor no more. She's Sarah Bristol. Never respected law enforcement. Before she took office, her and Brian Delagrange were videotaping law enforcement in the park handling homelessness. That's the kind of people they are. They care more about the homeless than they do law enforcement, the community, anything else. I think you could look at their actions. They've always been that way. There is never about the businesses or the children or the community or anything else. It's always about the poor homeless people. And I would still stick to that today. Even when I said that comment back, I think that was on January 7th, is It's always about the homeless people. It's never about their conduct and what they do to the city, what they do to individuals or their homes. It's embarrassing. And, this injunction, the one thing that never came out, and I know why it's never came out, is when we got that letter in October from the attorney, the ADA attorney that sued, is our attorney, that it was Bartholomew, whatever his name is, the attorney. He sent us an email, and of course it's not public information because it's from the attorney to the council, and it said, do not worry about this threat. He did not think there was a case. I do not have that email no more because I'm not on the city council. I don't have privy to the emails, but he said that to us. So that's why I moved forward, is because he said, do not worry about the ADA thing. I know the current mayor knows about that because he asked about it before we did that on January 7th. He knew about it, and I forwarded him that email. The other counselors, that they know that email came out back in October that said, hey, I do not think they have a case for ADA compliance. So, that's never came out either. If we knew there was going to be a case, would I have done something different? Of course. If the attorney would have said, you're going to be sued because you're not ADA compliance, I think we would have looked at this a lot different. That wasn't the case back then. We were told the case is okay. And if you look at those memos that I was holding up too, Aaron Kubik is telling us that we need to do something different about J Street. He's even in that memo, it talks about going for overnight only. That was one of his recommendations. That never comes out. It's always about you bad counselors, you Dwayne Yunker, you did this. And I would say, you know what? I did do this, but I had a lot of reasons to do that. And I had information. I would say that the Daily Courier likes to spin it their way, and their opinion pieces, Scott's daughter, is not truthful. Those are opinions. It's not the facts. And the current city council, yeah, they are under a rock and a hard place dealing with this now because of this judge. It's his interpretation. Objectively reasonable is very objectively.
Yeah. It's objectively unreasonable. It's a very subjective, and I think it's purposefully written that way.
I think it is too. I agree. And to go further, the reason why we have these, House Bill 3115 is because the legislature back then jumped to conclusions about the court case that we originally had in Grants Pass, and they felt that they needed to do something. Well, they jumped the boat, and guess what? Now we have this new law that nobody in the country has to be objectively reasonable, and so we're the only one in the state now that has to jump through these hoops to be in compliance with time, place, and manner.
Understood.
No one else. So that part is ridiculous. We are not allowed as a city. I'm not a city council now to use what we think is objectively reasonable or you think objectively reasonable. That's a really a difference of opinion. I looked at it as like, okay, you get overnight to sleep on 7th Street if you want. If you really needed a rest, people never talk about this. The parks are open from like 7 in the morning, till like night. Any one of us can go down and lay down in the park. There's
Right.
covered lay down in the park. You can't set up a tent, the thing. So there's not like you couldn't rest somewhere.
Right.
If you and I want to take a nice siesta down at the park, that is able for everybody. It doesn't say, hey, only taxpayers. It says anybody can go down there and rest. And we've learned the longer these people are in one spot, the more stuff they gather up, the more trash. J Street was a health hazard. It was a
totally
complete mess.
You know what? When I remember last fall, and I forget exactly when it was, when they started setting up the camps, and they were going back and forth, extending the time period that somebody could stay there. And finally it got out to like 2 weeks or some crazy thing like that. And I think that it's a very difficult thing that once you are trying to meet this objectively reasonable standard and you give them 2 weeks, when you cut it back to overnight, all of a sudden that's pretty radical. It seems objectively unreasonable, and so people can use that against you. To what degree? I know that the mayor played a part in that, in assisting with this new lawsuit, or at least that's according to the paper. Do you think that there are people within the staff at the city who are equally sympathetic to this cause?
Oh, for sure. I hate to say this about Bradley Clark that works for the city. His wife works for the Mid-Road Foundation. So that's a little bit of conflict of, she's working for the Mid-Road Foundation, doing whatever for them, a paid employee. I definitely felt at times there was people undermining this in the city within the staff somehow. Information getting out to the public, and how do they know these things? There was things that they knew before even counselors knew. Well, how would that happen? Only staff, the top staff would know that. They call them the X team. So somehow
are you talking about stuff that the public wasn't privy to, like executive session type stuff?
I would say there was emails going back and forth between, or like when when the new council was going to come up and make a change to the J Street and everything, and there was, at the time her name was, Vanessa O.J. was getting information, or people out. There was information getting out on conversations that I only had with Aaron Kubik.
Oh.
So so how do these people, all that false information? There was a coordinated attack from, those, I would say Vanessa O.J. or the mayor on the new council and what was going to happen. They were upset. Well, you guys were trying to do an emergency, a secretive meeting, which, how is it secretive if you're talking to the city manager about setting up a meeting? That's not very secretive, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
And discussing it with the attorney. So all these conversations, actually, I was the one having these conversations with Aaron Kubik and the attorney, how to have a meeting, a earlier meeting. And, we got someone that's a prior counselor at the time, or, getting ready to be a prior counselor, trying to sabotage the new council, which it's not really secretive if you're having these conversations with your city manager and the attorney. That's not secretive.
So let me ask you, I remember in this very same meeting where you made those comments, a little bit later on, that the city attorney warned them not to do what they were doing. What do you think about what part he plays in any of this?
Well, I think here's a conversation that wasn't on the record or the email, was he wasn't comfortable. He hadn't done his homework yet that was the reason why he made that comment to us. That's what he said before. We knew about that. Well, I'm like, well, how long did you need? I mean, we've been in this boat for a long time. You're not going to make a statement of what you think after you've already made these other comments. I thought I was a scapegoat for him. And then the mayor, sheriff jumped on that and kind of made the council look bad. I thought, let me just say this. The mayor knew what was going to happen that night. He knew. So for him to say, it's not a secret that the new councilors obviously had a plan. And the new mayor had a plan. They ran on an agenda to do this. So when the mayor, Mayor Sheriff says that, I was like, well, you just threw the rest of the council under the bus when you knew what was going to happen that night. You've known for weeks. You actually knew for a month or two that was going to happen. That's what they ran on, that they were going to close down J Street. That was their promise to the people that voted them in. They promised that they would shut it down.
And by the way, it was a good move. It was the right thing to do. Now, unfortunately, the right thing to do and what we're confined to do by state law, HB 3115 in there. And listen, I personally believe, I don't have any evidence to support this, but I think that in the state, they saw the Supreme Court case and they knew that they were going to lose it. And that wasn't going to keep this. And there's a lot of moving parts here because there's a lot of state alliance with these NGOs / nonprofit organizations because there's a political, money laundering situation going on there. I'm sure a lot of these NGOs are giving back to Democrats, and because this is what pays them for setting them up so well in the first place, and so to put any power back in the hands of Grants Pass to mitigate the numbers of homeless people walking around is probably going to hurt their bottom line somehow, wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah, I definitely think there is a lot of laundering of money going through, but I don't know for sure how much or who's. Obviously, last month I had two different groups come and see me. One was a couple city councilors and the city manager from Medford. They were asking for more money for their homeless problems because they ran out of money because all the money they got was to set up what they had. Now they're out of money. This is going to be a continued thing. Homelessness is an expensive business with very little return. I mean, the margins are so small compared to like the mission. The mission has a very large return for their money. So the second one was the League of Cities. The League of Cities represents all the cities in Oregon, and they want to change it too. The League of Cities would like to get back to what we had before HB 3114 and actually 3124. Those two laws came into effect. 3124 made it to 72 hours. It used to be 24 hours when you tag someone or, hey, you have to move on their car or something like that. It was 24 hours. That had been that way for since the early 90s, I think it was. And then obviously 3115 was the time, place, and manner. This is hard on cities to deal with, and a lot of the cities want to change. I hear it from my other my other caucus leaders. The cities want to change it. They don't like the laws. The cities are complaining. They want to roll it back where cities have control how to manage homelessness.
Okay, so right now, I want to play this. This is last Wednesday night, and there's a comment here from Indra Nicholas, and then the mayor right afterwards, and it kind of puts things in perspective a little bit.
Indra?
I would just also like to add for the public that as city manager Aaron Kubik said, we are in uncharted waters. Like no other city is having to do this or deal with these issues. So whatever we vote we really don't know the outcome or how long or what's going to happen. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you. Any other discussion? So I'll add a couple of words here before we ask for some action. So basically, it's within public record. It's written within this lawsuit that they're defending the Oregon State Law SB 3115. We are the first case to go through the judicial system. We are the test subject. So there is a lot of questions that I know all of you have, that the public has, that I have, that we can't answer until we go through this.
So essentially, that's the rock and hard place situation. They're stuck there. They can't really do that much. They're in the middle of a situation where the judge has issued not an injunction. What's the term we're looking for here?
He put well, I don't know what is it. I don't know the word.
It's a temporary order of sorts.
Yeah, temporary order freeze on us on what we're doing.
Right, and so essentially they're stuck in this situation, and as you just mentioned with the city of Medford, now this law that the state law that we have forces the cities to pay for this. And I remember back when they first were setting up J Street, and they were talking about the services that they were going to have to do there, and it was going to cost somewhere, they wanted like $500,000 for, I forget what the period of time was, but I think it was less than a year. And so I can imagine if you just take $1 million a year out of Grants Pass, lowly Grants Pass's budget, that's a big deal. That's a tax, for the lack of a better term, on the people of Grants Pass, both in the fact that they're going to have to pay for it, which means they're ultimately at some point, if a city is going to keep the rest of their services on par, they're going to have to ask for more money from people. And so the cities are going to have to pay for this, or the state stomps on them, or has one of their little NGO pit bulls sue you and force you to pay for it. The only alternative is to overturn the law. I mean, don't you think cities need to be autonomous to some degree in terms of how they're handling the homeless in their town? If you're mandated to pay, to accommodate these people, it's if you build it, they will come.
I definitely think that last thing you said, they build it, they will come. I mean, we saw that in J Street where it started out and it just grew and grew and grew intense. And it was like, it was worse than going to Somalia or something I've been to. It's just, at least people rake the dirt there and kind of keep their little area clean, not down on J Street. I mean, that looked like people living in the dump. I believe the way that they want the homeless industrial want this is they basically want their own line item in the budget of the city of Grants Pass. You're going to have law enforcement, fire, homelessness, and then all your other city services. And the city of Grants Pass is already cutting it, $1 to $2 million a year because of inflation, and the taxes revenue coming in doesn't match what goes out. So we are always having to balance our budget, and it's, that's a lot of money. You take $2 million and take it out of your budget for a city our size, that hurts the city of Grants Pass. The only way I could see this happening, working, I know there's an idea about Vine Street, another group. If I would hope that would work out where another group could take over this, but I feel it's going to fail at some point because you're going to need money. Money's always the issue. They're going to need money to operate at some point. No matter if it's Mint or U-Turn for Christ or whatever it is, it takes money. And are
Yes.
people going to pay? And are people going to pay? You know, the mission has been very blessed that people donate. They don't take any government money, and that's a blessing for them, and they have a good return. But if you don't have a good return on your money, they're going to stop paying for it.
Right.
Nowhere,
Well,
no matter where. Go ahead.
Well, one nice thing about the mission, and the people are always poo-pooing this because it has this sort of, they have rules. There's some religious aspect to it, and they reject it because of that. But I think that aspect helps mitigate the more harmful population amongst the homeless. If there weren't other services around to keep them around, and the choices that they had were the mission or go find greener pastures somewhere, I think they'd go find greener pastures, and that's just totally fine with me. I understand that makes me, an evil person. But I just think that's better. That's ultimately better for the people of Grants Pass. I mean, it's one thing to put a greater financial burden on them. It's another thing to ruin the quiet enjoyment of their property and the increase in crime and uncleanliness. You're never, ever, ever going to be able to make an ADA compatible camp. I'm sorry, you won't be able to do it. They'll find some reason why you don't have a handrail in the right place. I remember right back when I first moved to this town, there was some guy that was making a living going around to doctor's offices and stuff like that and suing them for non-ADA compliance. And that's how he was making a living. He was getting payoffs. Settlements instead of, because it's always cheaper to settle a lawsuit than it is to litigate it.
My question about these 5 individuals that say that they're homeless and handicapped or something is we have a department in the States called Department of Human Services for elderly and disabled. I want to know how many times they've refused services from them. I want to know if they've talked to these people, the DHS. Why isn't DHS taking care of them? If they're so unable to take care of themselves, why hasn't DHS stepped in? Or have they refused services? If they've refused services, why is it the city's responsibility to take care of them? Because they refuse services from the state? Then now the state has to, the city has to go around and make accommodations for people that don't want to conform or go into housing or go into maybe the assisted living or whatever it is. We don't know that because obviously that's protective information. But I like to know because I've talked to some DHS workers that work in the elderly, and they tell me if they refuse services, there's nothing we can do for them.
Mm.
So, what do we do about these 5 individuals? How long have they been homeless? How long is this thing? And have you read their article about some of the reasons why they're homeless and, or disabilities? You're like, it was just, they're always the extreme, I don't know. You're always going to find someone with the sob story to put out there and, make them. But I agree that most of these homeless people somehow made some really bad choices. And they say, well, they're from here. They're local. They grew up here. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, my friends would step in, our family would step in and help me out. When they would stop is when I start burning bridges with them. Right. Once you start burning bridges, no one wants to help you out. We've heard these stories. Oh, they're from here. I just don't get it. I think
yes. You're pointing to something that I think is a really important element here is that they're wanting to remove the responsibility of the individual out of the circumstance. And, at some point, these people have to own where they're at. And, personally, and this is just me, If I was on the streets and I didn't know where my next meal was coming from, and I heard that the Gospel Rescue Mission had a warm bed and a meal for me, I would beat feet right down there, and I would live in the chapel, 18 hours a day if that's what they required of me. I can't imagine sleeping in a muddy rock pit full of feces and needles and garbage as an alternative to having to be inconvenienced by a sermon or something. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, there's been a lot of articles that are false about the mission. Oh, they don't take elderly. Yes, they do take elderly. You have to be able to make your bed and take care of yourself. And obviously you go to the bathroom on your own or take a shower. They don't obviously have someone to care for you. So they do take elderly. There is elderly people there. I've seen them there. I've visited the mission. I've talked to Brian about this. He's like, we take elderly people. We just can't take care of people that can't take care of themselves.
Right.
So these people are so bad that you're telling me in the parks that are elderly, if they can't take care of themselves, let's go back to DHS again. They need to be in a home. If they can take care of themselves, even if they're in a wheelchair, the mission will take them.
Right.
They just can't bathe them and help them go to the bathroom and all this stuff. The mission is ADA approved.
Right. Yeah, they have to be in order to be operating. The thing is, I have seen people at city council meetings. As a matter of fact, in that January 7th meeting, there was a gal who got up and said that the Gospel Rescue Mission doesn't take disabled people, which is clearly wrong. It's just not true at all. And Brian addressed that at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, a little workshop that they had. And I just think that there is a lot of misinformation going around. There's a lot of people behind the scenes who are incentivizing the nonprofit situation. They may be involved in these nonprofits, or I can't imagine that they, because I sometimes think that there are people somewhere up the chain here that are doing this to intentionally destroy, living conditions in a town like Portland. How do you explain Portland? How do you explain how Portland went the way it did for so many years? It's almost like somebody wanted to do that. Or were it just a bunch of true believers who actually believe how you help people is just keep shoving food in their mouth? I don't really know.
I would disagree. The mentality of the left right now is you give them a home and it'll solve all their problems. That is a false. And how are we going to solve homelessness? There's been homelessness around for thousands of years. Right. There's always been homelessness. You're not going to solve homelessness. Can you make it better? Can you do things that will improve it? Yes, but there's a lot of enabling going on. I listened to part of that meeting with all those nonprofits there, and Brian was there. You Turn for Christ, On Track. And if you looked at the numbers of accountability, they couldn't really tell you a lot of numbers about, what was their outcome number. Brian Botella knew exactly what his numbers were. There was an interesting thing in there that I don't think anybody caught. If you went back a couple years into a city council meeting when I first started, Summer, that works for On Track, the director, spoke about the waiting list. Back then, she spoke about the waiting list to get into treatment was about 160. She said the other day it was over 300. And the reason why it's over 300 is the state hasn't been focusing on treatment. It's been harm reduction. We have less beds today than we had 10 years ago, and we are not trying to solve addiction. We're trying to do harm reduction. The governor just said, I was in a week ago, I think I posted on it, she got refused for more harm reduction money. It's because she still wants to do harm reduction. It's not working.
Yeah,
people are killing themselves.
Yeah. Clearly. You know what? I I think that it is adequately proven that the methodology they're using is flawed. You know, you look at California. California spent over $20 billion
Yes.
trying to solve homelessness, and they ended up with more homeless people and worse conditions and tent cities that go on for miles. It's absurdly ridiculous, and I'd like to believe that maybe they're just immune to the truth about it, that it's not working, and but you would hope that when faced with the truth that it isn't working, that they would somehow change tactics. You cannot make an effective change in the life of a drug addict without first addressing the drug addiction. If you're not addressing the drug addiction, you're wasting your time. You're maintaining them in their condition by continuing to feed and clothe them and make sure that they're never too uncomfortable.
I think you have another thing going on here that people just don't realize is, you know, the governor keeps talking about finding more housing for these people. The type of housing that government builds is 2 to 3 times more than regular housing that you and I would go, you know, hire a contractor to build us a house. They're spending 2 to 3 times more taxpayer dollars to house one person or a family in a house than it almost costs to build a regular house. Right. This is, I think their goal is to have more people tied to the system, and then they're relying on benefits. You have control. Once you give people so much stuff from the government, they rely on it. You just look on the news right now, you watch what the Trump administration is doing, and these people are screaming about the waste that's being cut because they're not going to get their gravy train anymore. And I think that's what the Democrats think their part was, is the more people they have on the system when it comes to illegals, homeless people, whatever it is, if we can provide everything for them, we control the people. It's socialism. It's Marxism.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought this up, because this the video that you sent me last night sort of points to what their vision would be. Is they want to house these people, but when you look at the video in here, you will not see drug addicts. Basically, what you'll see is the unfortunate homeless. And I think they're very, very careful when they do this sort of thing, that they don't really show that aspect of it. They would never put the mess from J Street out on the news as though that represented the homeless. So here, let's take a look at this real quick.
Eugene, like many cities in the U.S., has a housing shortage decades in the making. We have one of the highest per capita rates of homelessness in the country, averaging more than 3,500 people experiencing homelessness in a city of 178,000, with only about 1,000 shelter spaces. The city of Eugene responded to this crisis by investing one-time local, state, and federal funds in creating a unique, collaborative network of shelters with social service providers.
Now, here's an interesting thing about that. One-time funding. And yes, they do. I've noticed over my years of watching politics, they do this a lot. The Sobering Center came into Josephine County in that exact same way. They give a 3-year grant, and then it has to be a line item in the budget. You have to fund it.
That's correct. Totally correct.
And so they strong arm you into having these services. Now, that doesn't look too bad. You go 6 months or a year down the road in that place, and you'll have something probably that looks somewhat similar to J Street. And, you know, and it's a shanty town. You know, it's unfortunate that this is the answer to this, but yeah.
Basically what it is, it's a shanty town. It's Hooverville, you know, from back in the day. And this is what we're putting people in, you know, and these are people probably that are not at the extreme, but those motorhomes are going to start dilapidating, falling apart. You know, they have the best pictures and it's like this, but you don't live like this until you've been sober a while and you've been treated, because homelessness causes a lot of problems. That's why they hoard things. It's bad. They always pick, you know, the people that probably went to this were probably the ones just probably down on luck. They're not the drug addicts, crazy mental health people. Right. These people are probably the ones that just couldn't afford to live anywhere because they just don't make enough money.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I think there is a scene toward the end of this video. Now, you see, look at these around. They're obviously just placed there. There's not a lot of stuff around them. I'm telling you, if you leave and the problem is when you don't make a distinction between one type of homeless and another, you know, people get mixed up about this stuff. You have, you know, drug addicts live like pigs, unfortunately, you know, and the unfortunate homeless, nobody doesn't want to help them. I think everybody wants to help the unfortunate homeless. But when you're stuck in a situation where you're mandated to take care of these people, then you're going to end up with J Street circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right when you say, well, there's different groups of homelessness, and I would say I would agree with you. And I've said this before. There's definitely different groups. These people you're seeing here on this thing are a whole different group than you saw down at J Street. I mean, those people will not live like that. These people wanted help. They wanted to move forward. They're there. The people on J Street, I mean, it's probably one of the worst things I've seen. And I've been over on like 20 countries in my life. Most of them are third world countries. People don't live like that in third world countries. Another thing that people don't understand is our poor people in America are very, very spoiled. You go to India or places in Africa or some, you know, Somalia or somewhere in these third world countries, they don't have cell phones. They don't have fat homeless people. That's what we have in America, is very fat homeless people a lot of times. And we have so much services. They don't have services like that. But people work. I think a lot of our problems are created by our government, especially state government policies. That's what's causing this stuff. They talk about, oh, we need affordable housing, but I would say we need affordable electricity. Your policies have caused electricity power to be so high. Yeah. You're causing people not to be able to live. So these good people that are probably the good homeless people, they can't afford to live because your policies have put them in poverty because you are going after environmental whatever. Well, you just made people poor. They can't afford to live anywhere. And then you have a policy that says rent, you know, this whole rent thing. It is even worse. They tried to put a rent cap. It made the rent go up even higher. Right. Every policy that Democrats put on there makes it worse. I would say pull the policies back. There's one right now for trying to make a policy for rent control in our mobile home parks. Guess what? You're just going to screw those people over more.
Yeah, well, I remember the way the policy went the last time when they said that you couldn't raise the rent more than 10% annually or something. So everybody maxed it out. Every year they went up 10%. Well, you know, in 5 years, that's 50%, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money. And I remember back in the day when I wasn't making a whole lot of money, and, you know, that would have hurt me. I got to be honest, that That would not be good. Now, the picture that is on here, this is a little bit more representative of what we were seeing around J Street and different parts of Grants Pass, where, you know, ragtag recreational vehicles patched together with looks like you know, ratchet straps, and most unfortunate. But and maybe you're pushing people to that point, like you said. Electricity, I know it's pretty damn near doubled since I arrived here. Now it's 20 years, but it's doubled, and you know, they didn't have to tear the dams out. I happen to think that you know, you could make fish ladders that the fish will use, and you know, solve whatever environmental problems they thought were happening from having the dams in there. You know, then we have natural gas turbines. We have a ton of natural gas available in the area. And you know, they could lighten up on the whole fracking thing. I think it's illegal to frack in Oregon.
There's no nuclear here either. It's against the law to have nuclear here. You think with all the technology we have in the world, we have, you know, Elon Musk can put people everywhere now. We got rockets everywhere, but we can't get a fish to go upstream, so we have to tear down dams, which alleviates flooding and gets water for irrigation and does all this stuff, makes electricity and power. We have a law that says here that you cannot have nuclear in the state of Oregon. I mean, how clean can you get with these little bitty nuclear reactors? Well, the policies are just killing people.
Yeah, and I was listening to Elon Musk talk about the modern nuclear, and he says the new small modular reactors that they're making now, it's impossible to make them melt down. They will just shut themselves off, and so, you know what, and you know, how many nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers have been running around the seas for the last 70 years? You know, a bunch of them, and we haven't had any nuke accidents with them. No. So I'm pretty damn sure that you can build safe nuclear power, and it's the greenest thing there is. But I think the green thing is it's a ruse. You know, they don't want to actually do that. I tend to think that these people are kind of anti-human. Anything that's good for human beings, they don't want it. Cheap energy is good for human beings. Cheap energy doesn't just mean cheap energy. You know, you have cheaper gasoline, you have cheaper diesel, you have cheaper groceries, and you have cheaper everything that you can buy at a store, because everything that has to be shipped, the cost of shipping has to be factored into the price. That's just economics. And so I think that if you have cheap energy, you can afford to, you know, deliver people energy at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, really, you know, and you know, all the people that want to have electric cars that wouldn't be able to have them on our current grid situation, especially with the advent of AI, which is super power hungry, you're going to have nuclear power here at some point. That's just an inevitability. And the blue states will be burning coal power, and the red states will have nukes. You know,
it's a fact. If you want to take people out of poverty, you give them power, you give them energy, and it allows them to get out of poverty, because exactly what you said, the cheaper power is, the cheaper everything else is for us. It's cheaper to turn your lights on, it's cheaper for the business to run, it's cheaper to manufacture thing, it's just cheaper for everything. And we've made power more expensive for people, more expensive for businesses. We put so many restrictions on it. They talk out of both sides of their mouth when these leftist politicians. Cheap energy, the energy they want is putting us in poverty. It's putting China above us. It's putting all these other countries that will take over us, because we have the most expensive energy. These are horrible policies that need to go away. We should have abundance of electricity. We're such a smart nation, and we do stupid stuff.
I went to Shenzhen, China in 2011. I was, looking at importing some stuff, and I went over there and I was totally blown away. I was very embarrassed at how bad some of the cities and airports and things looked in comparison to Shenzhen. Now, Shenzhen is a city's only been around since the 80s, but it is the most modern city I've ever been in. Hands down, I was blown away by it totally. And so we're taxed so heavily, and our governments are wasting so much money building high-speed rail in California, which is a total scam, by the way. That's just a union giveaway there. They're laundering money again back into the Democratic Party. But this is some of the reasons why we can't have nice things, is because government wastes a lot of money. And, the whole green initiatives thing, it all makes energy more expensive and everything more expensive for people. So, on a state level here, how can you do anything about these problems that we're talking about? HB 3115, SB 762, that's another attack on rural property owners. And there's a number of other things right now. Doesn't the state have some legislation that they're considering about metering rural property wells?
Yeah, we'll start with 762. I mean, obviously, it's attacked on property rights. Their policy is attacking when individual property rights. I'm the only representative in the House that got that letter. The only one. The only one in the Senate side was Senator Robinson. So these Democrats are not fazed by it. But you know what? Some of their constituents are. There's constituents, they're Democrats that live in the rural area. They are trying to push us all to live like China, basically in these high-rise buildings, and we'll all ride bicycles or public transportation. That's what they're doing to us. If it's a fire problem, that's between me and my insurance company, not me and the state. And then when you talk about 70% of Josephine County being government property, they need to point the finger at themselves, turn that finger and point right at themselves. What are they doing to protect us, protect my property rights? Because when I show you my picture, I'm not near no damn trees. I'm going to tell you right now, I have a pool and palm trees, and I live in the city limits. So my property is not going to start a fire. It's the woods that are about 400 feet from my house. That's not my property.
I do live in the middle of dense forest. There is no getting around that I am in the, high risk area. And I think that it's very wise to harden against that sort of thing, create defensible spaces and maintain that stuff. But I also believe that the federal government and the state government should be, protecting rural landowners from the fire hazard that comes from their mismanagement of the forests. And I'm hopeful that with the current administration, there may be some changes in that. I know that if they started delivering on the O&C mandate from, 1934 or whenever it was, the Josephine County would basically have FU money. We could just, a lot of this stuff would be a lot less of a problem because, if somebody threatened to sue us, we could afford to litigate and we wouldn't be as intimidated by that sort of thing. We'd have a lot more autonomy is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. with the timber industry going down is hurt everything in Oregon. So in the 80s, the school districts or the schools turned over their thing to the state because they weren't getting enough revenue because they used to get it from timber. They used to get all this stuff from, that stuff. The county was run off of timber dollars. A lot of the things were timber dollars, and now it is squeezed just squeeze the county of Josephine County and other counties like ours and the city of Grants Pass and the schools, where the state's almost running everything, and they're mandating us, the unions, everything is squeezing us to death. When it talks about your property, yeah, I think you have a responsibility about your property, but at the end of the day, that's going to be between you and your insurance company. Honestly, if your insurance company came out and said, hey, Mike, you know what? You're going to have to cut some trees and do whatever, or we're going to raise your rates. That would be one thing, and you're going to react to it. But that's not what's happening here. The insurance companies, they're just the fire map, are dropping you, whatever else. It's not a thing between you and your insurance company. It's the state saying, hey, just because you live in this area, you're part of the problem. They don't even know what my property looks like. They don't know what your property looks like. They just took this map and laid it over the top of us and said, anybody in this area, you're extreme. And it has no, scientific reasoning to it. You could live in a farm. You could be on New Hope Road and be at the Harmon's farm and, grassy green fields, and there's no trees because you're a dairy farm. It's a cow ranch now, and now you're the danger. And you have a river, the river right behind you. There's no rhyme and reason of anything they're doing. When it comes to state, we need the independent voters to start stepping up. There is the disconnect that I see between Republicans, independent voters, and Democrats. Democrats, they're social warriors. They volunteer for everything. They get involved with everything. Conservative people, they want to be left alone. That's our thing. Like, hey, I want less government. I want the government to tell me less of what I need to do. Let me live my life. I don't want to be part of these groups. That's kind of a more of a liberal thing, that you need to be part of all these different foundations and groups. Most of us just want to be left alone, raise my family, go to work, have a great life, and hope the government's doing well. That's not what's happened. We need conservatives. We need these independent voters that are frustrated with our government to say, you know what? We're not going to vote Democrat ever again until you change your policies and you start thinking about us. That's making a difference. You can complain all you want, but people got to start voting. Staying at home is not going to solve a problem either.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so public pressure is going to be the only way that you're going to overturn this on a state level. Is that if you threaten the longevity of the representatives in the legislature, then you're going to move something. And until you do that, they're probably feel pretty insulated from this. If they're not in a rural area, or if they're not in an area, where there's a lot of high risk ratings, those representatives are probably not going to feel the fire on this one. But the representatives from this area and other areas in Southern Oregon which have blue representation, maybe those people can be convinced that in interests of furthering their political careers, it would be a good idea if they decided to undo that.
The two things that we've talked about tonight is basically homelessness, the fire map. And both those people that represent us in those two areas that are the two key people are Representative Pam Marsh and Senator Golden. And they're the ones that are in charge of those. They chair both those committees. In the Senate, Golden chairs that committee. In the House, Pam Marsh holds the one on homelessness. So they live in Southern Oregon, and they control those committees. They control what comes in, what goes out of those things, what gets a hearing, what gets a workshop to be voted on. All of it's through those two people. That's who needs to put the pressure on. If we want the homelessness law to change, you need to go after Pam Marsh. You want the fire map to get changed, you have to go after Senator Golden. I call it Golden's fire map because it's his map. He should own this. It's his travesty. He did it to us. And I hope he's not there and his time's up in about 1.5 years because he's caused more problems. Just like Pam Marsh has been the problem for the homelessness. I mean, that video you showed earlier about Eugene, the governor was how great Pam Marsh was at working with it. Well, Pam Marsh is ruining Grants Pass. She's the one that causes this problem.
Yes, I agree. It's a big issue. Now, I don't want to keep you too long, but I did want to get your reaction to, I read an article, I read your article in the Eagle that just came out today, and it's very similar to the editorial that Richard Emmons penned here, and it suggests that what they're doing on a federal level with the Doge and things of that nature is having a big effect, will ultimately have a large effect on grant stream funding downstream in the states, because if you cut it off at the federal level, they can't really pass it on, here in the state.
Yeah, the federal government, we'll just do education because I'm on that committee of higher education and the ways and means of education, so the budget. Right now, the Oregon gets $1.5 billion in federal funds for education. And so you take that away, that's going to be a big hit to Oregon. And I'm actually extremely happy that they're doing this, because the only way to change these ridiculous policies to get rid of DEI or inclusion, or Portland State doing these anti-Semitic things, or, all about, or OHA doing all this trans surgery for children, is to take the money away. Money's going to talk. Right. I believe the Democrats are a little worried because they're used to getting all these slush money from the federal government. You take that away, you've taken a lot away. They're going to have to make some change. They're going to have to make some cuts. And if Trump does what he says he's going to do and what he's telling all of us going to do, and if we can stop being sued, these people, the Democratic Party that runs the state of Oregon is scrambling because they're not going to have all this money to do all these little crazy things that they do to us.
Right. And probably gives a little bit of urgency of putting the hurt on us right away, so they can normalize this thing and have us be, funding homeless camps in perpetuity now before they run out of money. But you mentioned Donald Trump and what he might do to funding in the states. Here, let's watch this clip.
The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine? Well, are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good. I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics. The NCAA.
I don't know. That was a governor's conference. Do you think Tina Kotek was in the room?
Well, I would hope she's listening to this. I hope that she understands when it comes to women in men and women's sports, there's no such thing as a trans. There's men and women. It's ridiculous to think that a man is the same as a woman. It's an 80-20 issue. 80% of our population does not think it's right to have men playing in women's sports.
Totally.
This is an easy thing. I've pressured with myself and Representative Dill, OSAA here locally. That's your high school, sports and stuff. There's nothing that tells them they have to have men and women's sports. They could change that today. Now, do we have legislation to try to change that? Yes, we do. I don't think the Democrats will let us have a hearing on it. They don't want a hearing on it. We have some of the most extremist Democrats around here. We know we have people that want reparations.
Right.
You know, there's a HR 3. This is one of the most ridiculous things too. We have a Representative Nelson, which is a House resolution. What usually House resolutions are about honoring people that have died, war heroes, people that done really great things. He has an HR, which a House resolution is that could be voted on the floor on Thursday to honor Black, what do you call it? Cross-dressers. You know what I'm saying? That do these cross-dressing thing.
Oh, right. The drag queens.
Drag queen. Yes. So we're going to be talking about this, like, of all the problems we have in Oregon, all of them, with the worst education and the affordability for housing, homelessness, fire maps. We're going to have to talk about this and vote on drag queens and have the honor they've done for the state of Oregon. This is just ridiculous. But that's what they have on their agenda, is honoring these. It's called HR 3, House Resolution 3. And how do you honor them? Like, there's nobody on the bill. It's not like it's John Smith, honoring John Smith, the first Black drag queen. No, it's just this industry. What? Okay, but that's not what the House resolutions are for. They're for honoring people that did great things, that changed, the system, or died in war, did great things in our country or state. But that's what the Democrats want to talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, in terms of the funding that President Trump was talking about in that last clip, I believe that they're tying funding they're changing the Title IX parameters there to include the no men and women's sports. So if you want the Title IX money, then you're going to have to comply with that. And it may well be, as he suggested in this thing, that, hey, if you don't comply with this, you don't get any of the money. That's what he said. And any of the money, I got to believe that's a lot of money.
Yeah, well, Biden changed Title IX. He changed Title IX when he was in, to change it all wokey, and you can have, men playing women's sports and DEI and all that stuff. Like, that's what Joe Biden did. And now Trump's reversed that and said Title IX, men will not compete in women's sports. We will not have, all this stuff in there. I totally agree. Education should be about reading, writing, arithmetic. Those are the things you need to learn. We don't need to worry about this. Now, if you're gay or whatever, you have those rights, but this shouldn't be the focus of school. It shouldn't be the focus of sports. You have these rights, but you don't have a right to force, like I don't have a right to force my religion on you.
As you mentioned earlier, these are like 90-10 issues. The general public is not confused about this kind of stuff. They just aren't. But the only way that they get any traction is to the extent that people are afraid of being called some sort of a bigot. That's the only power that they have. If they didn't have that power, they wouldn't have any at all. And, the vast majority of people are not for men playing in women's sports, and that's it. Well, listen, I appreciate you spending the time with me here this evening, Dwayne, and maybe we can do it again. It seems like we don't have any trouble digging into these things, and there's a lot of issues out there. I notice a very good source of information about what's going on as it relates to District 3 or the entire state is go to Dwayne Yunker's page on X there. He's got a pretty good following. I noticed that when you post stuff on there within a very short period of time, there's been a lot of people looking at it. So
we've definitely grown. We started that last April. We're almost to 3,000 followers now. I'm just trying to be real, keep people informed what's going on. Not afraid to show the ridiculousness that's going on in the state. I'm not going to back down. I think that people are tired of this stuff, and then we're going to post everything. If you're doing something stupid and you're in the legislature, I'm going to put it out there. That's just how it is. That's the only way they're going to get their attention, because they're used to hiding and no one putting their stuff out there. Well, if I put it out there, maybe they'll change their mind. I got to have public pressure on them, because I'm in the minority. So I'm going to be on the offense and go after them.
Well, and let me just make this point that you're in the minority in more ways than one, because there are a number of Republicans in this state and in the federal representative corps there that are weak, and they will go along with Democrats or rhino Republicans because they want to bring a few dollars back to their district. And I want my representatives to hold the line on certain things. I don't care about your, ice cream sundaes that you can bring back. I really don't care about any of that stuff. We should have enough of our own money that we collect in taxes to take care of what we need here. We shouldn't need you to bring back more money from the state. That's my personal opinion. And you're an anomaly in that department. You're not going to vote for tampons in boys' bathrooms because somebody's going to, stream a source of income into Josephine County as a result of that.
No, I will not do it. I'm going to hold people accountable. I put out there recently, I'm not going to vote for any increases on education. We got the highest amount of money going out for education. We got the worst results. Why would I reward that stuff? And I got a whole family full of educators. My son's a high school counselor. His wife's a first grade teacher. My sister-in-law's a teacher. My wife's a teacher. But guess what? I appreciate teachers, but the grades, the reading levels don't show it. The math levels don't show it. And it's not really them. It's the people at the top, because it's the policies that are pushing down on them. And that's for everything. I'm going to stand true to what I believe and keep fighting. I don't care what they call me. I really don't. You sent me up to Salem to fight, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight every day. You come in my office, you'll see the stuff that I'm for everybody. I don't care about all this other garbage. I think it is a distraction, and I'd rather you have more money back in your pockets and stop paying more taxes. Be less taxes, and you choose where to spend your money. I guarantee you spend it like places like the Gospel Rescue Mission, or places that are really doing a good job. Get back to those core things that we used to, feel like, hey, I want to give to this organization because they do good things. People are tired of that now. They're just tired because the government's taking all their money away from them.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
All right, Dwayne.